Hey guys, it's Papa Nasty here, and today I'm doing a video about the Lord of the Rings Rise to War, where I'll be specifically talking about how to build an effective army in 2.0. So, first thing is that there are two different types of commanders. There are direct damage commanders, or DD commanders, where the commander is the primary damage dealer. Then there are also support commanders, where the commander buffs your formations, or the commander debuffs the enemy formations. You can have hybrids, but generally speaking, they don't really work in hybrid fashion because a direct damage commander requires different types of gear to what a support commander does. So you've got to sort of choose one or the other, which is here where we come to here, which is our direct damage commanders. Equipment stats. Commander damage is their primary skill that they should be taking, their primary stat. And then commander attack or focus for their secondary skill. Commander attack for physical damage, or focus for focus damage. for focus, poison, or burn damage. Okay, so yeah. So you've got to look at the commander's skills and then decide, do they primarily do physical damage or do they do elemental damage? Troop types, ranged. Now you could put a direct damage commander in with melee troops. You could, but there are just some advantages to being ranged, because when you're running a direct damage commander, you are generally speaking going to be focusing on your commander stats, right? You're going to be having commander attack, commander damage, or focus. And as a result, you are not really going to be prioritizing your stats for your units. And so your units are likely to have low defense. This means that if they get attacked, they will take a lot of damage. And you're not going to have the command stat, which reduces damage taken. So again, if you get attacked, you're going to take a lot of damage. With this in mind, if you are a ranged, if your troops are ranged troops, then only other ranged troops can attack you, unless of course you have all your melee units already dead. So, so this reduces the amount of attacks that are going to be directed at your commander's formation if you run as ranged instead of as melee. So it's just better. You just get attacked less. Also as well, when you are ranged, you can counterattack anyone that attacks you. But if you are if you're ranged and you attack someone that's a melee unit, that melee unit cannot counterattack you because you're out of range for them. Okay, so that's the other advantage of being ranged, is that you get to counterattack everyone, they don't get to counterattack you. Now, some examples of evil direct damage commanders, right? So Saruman, he's going to be using focus. He hits like a truck, he's really good. Shadow, he's going to be using attack. He hits everything. He just hits everything with his regular attacks, and he's awesome. He does heaps of damage. Skullhelm, I haven't used her a lot, but she's a focus commander. Lurtz, attack commander, physical damage, hits like a truck. And Celesto, I can't remember his name. I've never used this guy. From what I gather, he's meant to be really good. And so I've put him up in this sort of group of 5 at the top, which is these are the 5 direct damage commanders on Evil that are meant to be the best. So these are the ones I would highly recommend that you use. Next we've got Exog. Now I haven't really used him, but he looks really good. The only thing that lets him down is that he's tier 1. And so because he's tier 1, his stats are horrible. But if you give him enough gear, that will compensate for the lack of stats, I think. But he does look really good. He's just got lots of good DD abilities. I just haven't actually had the time or spare gear to test him yet. But he could be good. Khaldun. Now, most people wrote off Khaldun when when 2.0 first came out. But Khaldun does actually have some decent direct damage abilities. It's just he's just nowhere. He's just not even in the same league as what he was previously. Also, as well, he's tier 1, so his base stats before you add on gear are just not really that great. And as well, previously most people used him as sort of like a hybrid direct damage slash troop commander, whereas now you would only really use him as a direct damage commander because his support abilities are kind of rubbish. So so these two could be good as direct damage commanders, but I haven't really tested them, but I just sort of think that they've got a decent chance they could be alright. Next ones, we've got our ring wraiths here. So we've got Kamul and the other guy, I forget his name, LOTR. Right, and now these two here, they're actually really interesting because what they actually do is there are 3 abilities. Like their top R1s are both quite good, but then there are 3 abilities will essentially do a similar amount of damage to what a regular direct damage commander's ability would do over the course of an entire fight, but they're going to do it in the first 3 rounds. So they really sort of front load their direct damage, which that makes them potentially really useful. The other ring wraiths, say like Witch King and Skullhelm and Celesto, I think they all do sort of the same thing as well. And so potentially you can really sort of nuke someone at the start of combat. Now, usually you might say, well, but then White Council is just going to nerf all that damage. But actually, if you have higher initiative than the commander who is casting White Council, then your damage won't be affected by White Council at all. And for ring wraiths, they generally have quite high initiative. So if you can get higher initiative than what Gandalf the White or Gandalf the Grey has, then your damage won't be nerfed at all, and you can actually do a lot of good early damage in the combat. Next one, okay. Next one's here. So these two here, they could be good, but they're just not really optimized very well. They're just not very optimized well. So Adune, she just her when you put in 5 skill points and 10 skill points, she just doesn't really gain much of a benefit from those sort of markers as much as others. Also, as well, some of her direct damage abilities are sort of aimed at being a hybrid between physical and focus damage, and that just makes it difficult to really focus on one or the other. You want to be all focus or all attack, and so that's just sort of lets her down. For Yusra, she's got a couple of alright abilities, but she's just not quite there. Zigreed, he's just don't bother. Like, he's a direct damage commander, so I included him, but he's just not very good. Same with Ugthak and this fella over here, I forget his name, Ugluk. They are all 3 of these are direct damage commanders, and they have all these abilities to buff their attack. Right, and I mean there's other ones too, like Shagrath and things as well, who they have all these abilities to buff their attack or buff their formations attack. But and I mean, I suppose that could be alright if you don't have any gear. So maybe in like a season 1 or something, that could be quite good. But in the later seasons, buffing your attack is just not very effective. Like, to go and spend like a huge amount of points on to only buff your commander's attack or only buff a single unit's attack, because they don't have the supporting base stats to make buffing units effective, because their base command is very, very low, because they're intended as direct damage commanders, but they don't actually have many direct damage abilities. And the direct damage abilities that they do have don't hit hard enough, even with a million attack or whatever. They don't hit hard enough to justify being used. So I wouldn't use these 3 at all, or any of the bottom row really. Start at the top, work your way down. Then we've got our support commanders. Right, their equipment stats, command is their primary stat that you want to have. Command will reduce the damage that your units receive, and it will increase the amount of damage that your units deal. So that is a very, very effective stat, either for a tank or for a damage dealing unit. Next, you will have either unit attack or unit defense, depending on the role that your units are going to play and your commander's abilities, etc. Yeah, in general, even if you're a damage unit, you do want to have some unit defense as well, as otherwise you're going to get hit really hard. So unit defense is always a good stat to have. Now you can either be ranged or melee, depending on how how you intend on building your formation and sort of what synergize as well. Now some examples. This guy here, I can't remember his name. I don't actually have him. My alt's got him, but I don't. But he's an amazing tank, like just absolutely amazing tank. But he's amazing for having like trolls or something, or orcs or whatever, as a tank unit. And he gives good support buffs too. Witch King. Now Witch King is actually a really kind of a little bit of a surprising one, because actually Witch King has really good direct damage abilities. He's got 2 good direct damage abilities, and you could use Witch King as a direct damage commander. But Witch King just has these amazing stats. He has the highest base command stat out of all of the evil commanders. So just when you equip units to him, they just deal more damage and receive less damage than anyone else, just because he has a really, really high command stat. Also, as well, he has really high initiative. So having really high initiative means that there's a good chance that he will get to attack first, and that sort of just gives you a few advantages when you're playing around with different sort of formations and things. Obviously, of course, he's also got his follow-up abilities as well for the whole army. But he's a very, very good troop commander, and can be a good direct damage commander too. Sauron. Now, Sauron, most people would think is a direct damage commander, but he's not, because in 2.0 his damaging abilities are just rubbish. They just don't scale well with focus, or they just don't do enough sort of base damage. It's really unfortunate. His abilities just don't scale well with focus, and so even if you give him sort of like the best gear that you can possibly sort of give him, he might only do 40 or 50k commander damage. When if you give that same gear to Saruman might do 80 or 100. Like Saruman will literally do twice as much damage as what Sauron will. Where Sauron is really good though is that Sauron does have a very high base command. In fact, all of these, I'll just bring them up here. All of these tier 3 commanders here, except for Saruman, have really good base command. Okay, and so as a result, they all make good troop commanders. Like, they're just going to be better than a tier 1 or even tier 2 commander, unless that tier 1 or tier 2 commander has amazing abilities. Like if you're just choosing it's quite astonishing just how much of a difference there is. They just make tier 3 commanders better for the support commanders, and for the direct damage commanders too, but it's particularly noticeable with support, because for support commanders you're not necessarily as reliant on abilities to deal damage and things. But anyway, so these commanders have got they've just got really great base command. Sauron's sort of really great thing is his status effects, his stuns and his madness, and he can potentially steal enemy buffs if you have 5+ on the Deceiver. He can inflict enemy commanders with madness and then cause them to buff your units instead of their own. The Undying, he's got one of the great things about him is his Undertaker ability, in that it'll hit lots of targets and then you can burn away White Council quite quickly. Also as well, his his R3 helps to burn away White Council. No, sorry, it's not affected by White Council. But but also as well, he's got his bottom R0, which gives evade, and that's one of the great things about him, is that you only really, even at just sort of R2, you get two really good abilities that you can use on him. Sunand, her R3, if you use beasts and then use her R3, that's really good with troops. She's just a general sort of, just quite useful as a buffer. But yeah, her R3 is what you want to be using. If you're not using her R3, then I feel like you're not really getting the true value out of Sunand. As her healing for the R5 is okay, but it's not amazing. It looks a lot better on paper than it actually is in practice. Next one, Black Serpent, just again great command stats, and he's got some great buff skills for evil men. Him and the crazy cat lady, as I like to call her, they've both got really good buff stats for evil men, as of course does Kieran. So you can sort of set up, these two, run these two here as giving sort of buffs to your evil men. So Black Serpent and the crazy cat lady, and then you have Kieran there, who's, if you're running 4 evil men types, then his troops can actually hit really hard. So in particular, if you were to use him with half trolls, or of course you can set up half trolls on something like Witch King, because of Witch King's really high command stat, and so you could run sort of like Witch King, Black Serpent, Crazy Cat Lady, Kieran, or something like that. Like there's so many different combinations that you could run that would be worthwhile. If you've got all of these sort of tier 3 commanders at R5+. Saruman, he does not have good command stats as a base, but he has an amazing R5 ability, where his R5 ability, Shaku, scales with command. And so if you give him really good command abilities, really good command stats, then he can just give your troops just this huge, amazing buff from Shaku. In saying that, I still use him as direct damage commander instead of command. So you can sort of decide what you want to do. But he has the ability to either be an amazing direct damage commander or a very good command support commander, because his Shaku is really strong. Good's got much better buffs, but it's as good as we get on evil. Okay, next one we've got Azrukor. Azrukor is, I don't know how he is in the regular campaigns, but in Tactics Evolved he is amazing. He just pulls out, smashes huge amounts of damage if you give him ARPs with Dispersion as their elite skill. You will, and then you give him Radar as the R3. He will just pump out huge amounts of damage with that, just absolutely obscene amounts. So much so, people might call for it to get nerfed, because it's just so easy to do. But that's for Tactics Evolved. There's lots of broken combinations in Tactics Evolved. Then we've got Gothmog. Gothmog's just solid. In general, these Orc commanders, Gothmog and Gorbag, you can run them both together, and you can run them with sort of other Orcs and things as well, and they're just generally good buffers, and their base command stats as tier 2 is alright. It's not amazing, but it's alright. Glarsha has this amazing ability at her bottom R0. It's essentially like Mouth of Sauron, but it only affects enemy troops, not your own troops. Mouth of Sauron, Mouth of Sauron and Glarsha are just very good sort of defensively for reducing the enemy damage. Then we've got our bottom row here. These are the ones that they're just not quite there as a troop commander. Like for LOTR, I think that he's better as direct damage. He's got some abilities which are meant to be for sort of Reapers and Fallen, but they're just not very good. You just don't actually gain that much from them. I mean, the one for Reapers, it's at 10 points you get, I think, 10% damage reduction, which is alright. But the rest of the points spent feel like they're not really achieving much. Shaku, he's yeah. He's got a heal. He's got a heal for his unit, and that's kind of nice. Yeah. Anyway, so basically bottom row probably wouldn't recommend using, but in a pinch, they do have some useful buffs. The R5 ability for Ugluk, Glacier, and Lurtz is really good. It reduces the healing received, but it gives a really nice buff to their troops, and so that's sort of nice. But this bottom row I wouldn't use. Middle row, I'm happy to use these. I use them, most of them, in my secondary teams, or Ezra Core in my main team. Glacier I was using on my alt in one of my main teams. But in general, tier 3s are just better. So yeah. Next one, key principles of combat. Right. Okay. So first thing is that attacks hit both the commander and units. Right. So every time that you attack, you're going to hit the commander and the unit, because you're attacking the formation, and so you get to attack everything. This is part of why commander hit points is, although not a sort of really, really, really important stat, it is a useful stat, because your commanders will take damage each time that they're attacked. So particularly if a commander is a melee unit, and especially if they are the only melee unit, then you either want to have really high defensive stats, or alternatively you want to have sort of high hit points on your commander. Because if you're getting hit a lot, you're going to take a lot of damage. Next one, so melee units can only attack other melee units. I'll put a little star there because the caveat to this is that if you have a priority, like for example Dunedain Rangers, they will attack the priority unit rather than melee units, so they'll attack ranged. And of course, if all of the melee units are dead, then melee units can attack ranged units. Melee units can only counterattack melee units. So that's relatively straightforward, although I have seen some examples of them counterattacking ranged units. It's, as far as I'm aware, they're not meant to be able to counterattack ranged units, but sometimes it happens and I'm not sure why. Next one, ranged units can attack any unit type. So ranged units will just attack randomly, someone random. It could be melee, it could be ranged. Also, ranged units can counterattack anyone. So they can counterattack both melee and ranged. Now, with your damage, with your attack and defense stats, for every one point of attack that you have higher than the enemy's defense, you will gain 1.4% additional damage dealt. Right, and for each 1 point higher that your defense is than their attack, you will gain a minus 0.6% damage received for each point. So if you have 10 points, that's 6% less damage. If you have 10 points more attack than them, that's 14% extra damage. So that means that your attack and your defense is really important. But there is a bit of a caveat to this, which is that there is a cap on how much percentage gains you can receive. The cap is roughly around 40. Now, I'm quoting this stuff, this is just what I've read, okay? It is not something that I have specifically tested myself. There's some guys over at, I think, Gore or something, who they sort of worked this out on the PBE. So the cap is at around about, after you've got on more than about 40 points. So 40 points is, that's around about sort of like 60% damage increase, or if you have a roughly 24 or 25% damage reduction. So that's quite a swing. So you got sort of yeah, you got quite a swing of sort of plus 60 to minus 25 roughly. That the damage can swing depending on your stats and their stats. Now, Commander's damage is not reduced due to unit casualty. So this is a big change from prior to 2.0, from the original version. And so this means that direct damage commanders are very, very strong, because they will continue to pump out the same amount of damage each turn until they're actually killed. So even if you just had a direct damage commander and no troops, they can still dish out a lot of damage. So you got to really sort of bear that in mind. And this is why your direct damage commanders will often be the primary damage dealers for your setups. Command gives plus percentage damage dealt and minus percentage damage received. So if you want to be tanky, use Command. If you want your units to do damage, use Command. Next, these are some army setups that I've been using in Tactics Evolved this season, right? And I've found them to be extremely effective. Now, I've sort of set up the skills as though if you were R5. Okay, even though my commanders are a little bit higher, but say like for my alts commanders, they're all sort of around R5. So this is what I'd run on my alt. So 5 out of 10 Undertaker, 10 out of 10 Undead Commander, 1 out of 10 Weapon Master. That's at level 50. And for the primary stats, we'd be using Command and Unit Defense, right? And so that's on Undying. And I've got them there using Vanguard, but you could use Mountain Trolls, you could use Great Beasts, you could use Crushers or Berserkers, just any sort of tanky unit. Next, on Witch King, I've got him using Spear Throwers. Now this is sort of one of the essential things for this combination to work, is that he's using Spear Throwers. And what I've then given him is Black Captain, and now 10 out of 10 Black Captain. Now Black Captain will not affect the ARBs, because they already have follow-up. But I'm still going to put 10 out of 10 into Black Captain, because I want my Spear Throwers to get an extra follow-up in round 1 and round 2. That's how much I want them to get follow-up, is that even though it won't affect half of my troops, I'm happy for it even to just only affect the Witch King, because just getting that extra follow-up on the Spear Throwers is really important, and I'll explain why soon. And then 5 out of 10 Lord of the Nazgul. I think that gives him his chance to stun them. 1 out of 10 Ring Wraith. And then use Command for his primary stat and Unit Attack for his secondary stat. Now, because Undying is the tank here, and Witch King is your, he's going to be inflicting the bleed, and so you want to try and really give your best unit attack gear, your best unit defense gear to these two. And then here we've got for Shadow, we've got Shape of the Void, right, which is follow-up, Undertaker, which allows him to hit multiple targets, and then 1 out of 10 in Black Demarian. Ideally, of course, you want to have more in Undertaker. You want to be maxing this out, but you need at least 5. So this is your minimum. Okay, so you put the rest of the points in, and then Commander damage and Commander attack for his stats, and then I've got Saruman in here with 10 out of 10 of many colours, 5 out of 10 Voice of Saruman, and then any extra points put them in Sharky. Of course, max out Voice of Saruman if you can, but 5 out of 10 is what's necessary so that you can start inflicting madness. And then he's going to use Commander damage and focus. Now, how this works, okay, is that the Spear Throwers inflict bleeds on everyone, because they're going to initially have follow-up, so they'll inflict 2 bleeds per turn, hopefully, and they, unlike half trolls, Spear Throwers will actually, they have 2 turns for their bleeds, not just 1, and as well, they will choose their target, they will prioritize targets that do not currently have a bleed. So this means that you will have, like by the end of sort of the Witch King's turn 2, all 4 targets will hopefully have bleeds on them. And how how this sort of works then is that the Witch King has very high initiative. So he should be going first out of all of your commanders. Because he goes first, that means that you're gonna have all 4 bleeds up before the start of the next round, before the start of round 2. On round 2, Shadow is going to hit 3 targets, and then he's going to get his 90% follow up and hit another 3 targets. And then his Arbs are going to hit 3 targets with dispersion, and then they're going to hit the target with attack. Saruman is going to do the same. He's going to hit 3 targets with dispersion, 1 target with his attack. Every one of these hits, every one of these physical hits, is going to be hopefully going to be hitting a target that's bleeding. When you hit a target that's bleeding, the target that's bleeding will take 10% of the damage that the spear thrower would normally do. So if your spear thrower has really high unit attack and really high command, they might be hitting for 7,000, 8,000 damage per hit, which will mean that your bleeds will be hitting for 700 or 800 damage with each hit. So that means that when your Shadow hits 3, then 3, then dispersion hits 3, and then the regular attack hits 1, that's 10 times that Shadow's hitting a bleeding target. So that means that they're going to be doing an extra sort of 7,000 damage just from the bleeds. And then Saruman's going to have his turn. And then Undying is going to have his turn as well. Undying's only going to hit 4, Saruman's only going to hit 4, because they don't have sort of the follow-up on commander attacks, and Undying doesn't have ARBs, but you could run Halberdiers you could run Halberdiers, but Halberdiers are a little bit bugged at the moment with the Eradicate ability. But anyway, so that's how it sort of works, and then so you end up inflicting all this huge amount of bleed damage. Now you can mix and match these commanders a little bit if you want, to sort of try and get a stronger combination. The main thing is that you got Shadow, you got Undying, right, with their Undertaker abilities. You got Witch King with spear throwers, and there's high initiative, and then you've got and then the final commander is a direct damage commander. You could run Lurtz. Lurtz would actually be better than Saruman. I mainly put in Saruman there just because I wanted to have an example of focus commander, and then people can, it's sort of better for spreading out your gear kind of thing. If you're just going for one single formation, then you can put your best focus gear on him, your best physical commander damage gear on Shadow, etc. So yeah. Anyway, that is the formation that I recommend for Tactics Evolved. I've got another one that I'm using, which is this here. I'm just going to go through this one quickly. Basically, this one here is Sunind using her R3 Panther Leader. Okay, Panther Leader makes every time that that 3 of the units in the army deal damage. Attack, not deal damage. Big difference between those two. Then there is a 50% chance of them dealing some poison damage. So if you've got lots of attacks, then you can potentially do a lot of poison damage. So things like ARBs, they've got a 20% follow-up chance. So if they get their follow-up chance, that 20%, then they've got a chance that they will also deal additional poison damage as well. As you recall, he has the Raider ability, his R5, which gives him a 40% chance to have follow-up. Unfortunately, this ability doesn't work on ARBs, and so you have to use either spear throwers or snipers to actually utilize this ability. But it is, so it's a good ability, 40% follow-up. But the main thing for him is that, sorry, that's Corsair of Umbar, is his 10 out of 10 radar. Because the spear throwers are great. You can go and, with his follow-up, he can help to set up lots of bleeds and stuff, and you do a similar tactic to the previous previous army. But then if you don't have him at R5 yet, or you don't have enough points to do both of these, or even just if you don't have spear throwers, because you're in Rune or something, you can just use ARBs on him. Just use ARBs on him, put 10 out of 10 on radar. He'll do huge amounts of damage. He'll do, like 80, 100k, 120k. I've had him do as high as 150k just using ARBs before, because ARBs with dispersion in Tactics Evolved is just insane for him, because his R3 radar, every time that you deal damage, there is a 50% chance that you will also inflict burn damage. And so this makes Azrael damage just off the charts, because you're doing 3 hits with dispersion, and then you do 1 hit with poison, and with your regular attack, and then 1 hit with poison. Except that these aren't actually, that's 5 hits in total, but it's not actually 5 hits, because that's hitting 5 formations. And every time that you hit a formation, you hit the unit and you hit the commander. And if you and his radar ability, when it procs, it doesn't proc to just hit the commander that you've damaged, or just hit the unit that you've damaged. It procs to hit the whole formation that you've damaged. So if you hit, if you hit formation 1, and that's got Gil-galad and some heralds or something in it, right? Then you'll damage the Gil-galad and get a 50% chance to proc it, and then you'll damage the heralds and get a 50% chance to proc it. And if it procs, then it will damage both Gil-galad and the heralds. It's kind of weird, actually. Even I think sometimes it actually just hits something random. It doesn't necessarily even hit the unit that you are actually damaging. It's kind of weird like that. But anyway, he just does insane damage. Blurts, he's just, you're basically just putting a direct damage dealer in here, and then I put in Sauron. I preferred to use Skullhelm, but my Skullhelm is only R2. So I just haven't used her a lot yet to actually be able to know how to sort of skill her up and things. But Sauron, if you run this spec here, 10 out of 10 the Deceiver, and then you only need 1 in Lord of Gifts, 1 in Gorgotha, because the main thing with Sauron is that he does terrible focus damage. You can put as much focus as you want into him, but it just doesn't scale very well. However, with the Deceiver, you're able to buff everyone else's damage by debuffing the enemy, and as well, you can actually cause madness in the pre-battle phase. And if you cause madness on enemy commanders in the pre-battle phase, then they can potentially give the enemy's buffs to you instead of to their own troops. For that, you need to have higher initiative than their commanders, though. So the best set to run on him is actually an initiative set, so that way he can act before the enemy commanders, and then you have a chance at stealing some buffs. But I feel that the percentage chance of it actually working is significantly lower than what the stats actually say. I don't know why, but it maybe I've just got bad luck, but it just never actually seems to work for me. But that's how it's meant to work. And of course, by having 2 ARBs there, you can burn away 2 ARBs with dispersion. You can burn away. White Council really, really quickly. Anyway, I hope that this has been informative or something for people. This video has taken way longer than what I expected, and I apologise that it's taken so long. I hope that it's been worth it. If you think it was worth it, leave a note in the comments, like and subscribe and all that. Otherwise, I'll try and maybe do another video later this week with some more tips, and I'll try and make the next one a bit shorter. Apologies for that. Cheers all, thanks, and I will catch you all later. See you.